You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marchegiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. It's Dr. J here. Evan, how's your magical Friday doing?
Oh, it's very magical. I just had some bone broth mixed in with some of this Pacific organic chicken and wild rice soup. So that's my breakfast before you ask me.
Nice. That sounds really good. I actually just got a Vitamix. Super stoked about it. I actually made some awesome ginger tea this morning. I've been doing that a lot. Ginger is phenomenal, especially if you're having die-off reactions, when you're doing gut-killing programs for infections, or even if you're sick. Ginger has some amazing properties that it can help basically viruses that adheres to maybe your throat or particular tissue in the body. It can help pull those viruses off. It's also anti-inflammatory. It's anti-coagulative, meaning it keeps the lymph fluid moving, it keeps the liver moving, and it's anti-inflammatory. So just a phenomenal herb, and I just blended it up with some lime and added a little bit of honey in there, and it's just pretty phenomenal.
So you just took a little chunk of lemon, you threw that in with water, and you squeezed lime juice in there, or you threw a lime without the skin, or how do you...
The Vitamix is like a blender on steroids, so I just threw in like maybe a chunk of raw organic ginger from Whole Foods. It's maybe about the size of my fingers. Threw them in there, added just a little bit of water, and I threw a whole lime in there. Probably wasn't the best bet throwing a whole lime. I think you're better off just squeezing the lime juice in there, because once you get the rind going, it's a little bit tart. But just squeezing the juice in there, blending that up, and then I mixed it in with some hot water on the stove. Just enough to fill up a coffee mug, and then poured it in, stirred it up, add a little bit of honey, and that was good to go.
I think you just wanted to test the power of your new Vitamix. So you threw the whole lime in there. Total lime domination.
I know, absolutely. So it was good. I enjoyed it, and really good thing to use if you're having a sore throat or you're starting to come down with a cold or you're on a gut-killing program. I recommend that to all my patients.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot better than going and getting... I can't even think of any over-the-counter remedy that's crap right now. Can you name one?
For your throat? I mean, man, I think they just have like some Robitussin kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the only thing I can think of. Now, ginger's a natural tussin. All tussin means is it's a anti-cough, so to speak. So it helps kind of decrease that cough reflex. But ginger's great.
Yeah. If I were to boost that thing up, I would add in like a half teaspoon of Schizandra extract and like sneak an adaptogen into that drink. I bet it would be even better.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Anytime you're sick, the medicinal mushrooms are powerful. Just like the adaptogenic herbs, they have an effect on the immune system and the adrenals. Where the mushrooms really have a strong effect on the immune system, especially reishi or shiitake, a very powerful medicinal mushrooms that have been used for thousands of years.
Yep. I know we got limited time today, so I guess we should dig in.
Let's dig in. So we're going to talk about the gut-brain axis. I had a patient the other day asked if we could dig into this, and I said, let's do it.
Sure. So where should we start?
So anytime we talk about like an axis, like the HPA axis or the HPT axis, the HPTAG axis, all these abbreviations are just for different parts of your body and the various feedback loops that go downstream to upstream and communicate. So like, for instance, the big ones like the HPA axis. What does that mean? H and P stand for hypothalamic and pituitary, hypothalamus and pituitary. Those are parts of your brain. And then the A stands for adrenal. So it's just that feedback loop of communication. And we need these feedback loops so our body can adapt to stress. And stress disrupts a lot of these feedback loops. Now, on that note, we have what's known as the brain-gut axis, which is the brain talking to the gut and the gut then talking back to the brain. Now, everyone knows, or everyone's probably familiar with the central nervous system. That's the brain and the spinal cord, the CNS, central nervous system. Well, we also have a nervous system that has just as many neurons in the central nervous system in the gut. It's called the enteric nervous system. And this is its own nervous system in the gut. So we have this kind of crosstalk between the brain to the gut back to the brain. And it's pretty profound. Now, I find a lot of people, they have a lot of dysfunction. Like, let's say you're having memory issues, brain fog issues, mood issues. I find a lot of issues today are emanating from the gut and feeding back into the brain via inflammation, via dysbiotic bacteria, via infections, via the infection-like byproducts such as lipopolysaccharide, LPS, or endotoxin, via food allergens getting into your bloodstream, via pesticides and junk in the environment getting into your gut and into your bloodstream and affecting your brain. So anytime we see fire in the gut, we see fire in the brain.
I absolutely had that when my gut was messed up, which got me into all this health stuff. Depression was probably my biggest symptom. Started out as brain fog, just feeling like I was looking at life through an opaque piece of glass, and then eventually depression wrecked me. And obviously I was working third shifts at the time too, if people go back and listen to my old episodes and complaints there. But eventually, after the gut got fixed, those symptoms went away. So the connection is huge, and I felt it firsthand.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of people with gut issues, and they don't really equate their gut issues causing their brain problems. Now, there's a doctor out there, Dr. Karazian. He's a good guy. I've learned a lot from him. I took all of his classes and courses. Now, he's a big fan because he's a chiropractic neurologist that a lot of gut issues really emanate from the brain. Now, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. Now, I do agree that some gut or some brain issues could potentially cause gut issues, especially in the realm of trauma, car accidents, head trauma, bumping your head and such. I do believe that type of trauma can affect the gut because the vagus nerve, it's a parasympathetic nerve fiber that kind of makes its way from the brain, is the 10th cranial nerve in the back of your brainstem, but also makes its way and has an effect on every single part of your body. And that vagus nerve, again, controls the rest and relaxation. Now, Dr. Karazian's a big fan of like the gargling and the singing to really activate that vagus nerve. But frankly, I think it's okay. I think it's good as a palliative way to support parasympathetics. But let's face it, if you have a gut issue, and its underlying issues primarily gut-based, you're not going to be able to sing your way back to a healthy gut. You're not going to even be able to gargle your way back to a healthy gut. I really think depending on your history, as long as you don't have this type of trauma that we're talking about, you're going to typically have to be focusing on the gut primarily to get things working again.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the things that could lead up to the dysfunction of this system. For me, I always go to low HCl levels first.
Low stomach acid, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're just not going to be breaking things down if you're coming across some organisms in your food that shouldn't be there, some other bacteria or pesky things. If you don't have enough HCl to kill those guys off and properly digest those foods, then that could create other issues downstream.
Yeah, I would even go one step higher up. I think low stomach acid, but people don't typically just have low stomach acid out of the blue. There's some type of stress that's activating their sympathetic nervous system response, right? Parasympathetic being that vagus nerve stimulation. The sympathetic essentially is going to be the branch of your nervous system that's the fight or flight. It's the part of your nervous system that activates the adrenal glands. That's when your adrenal glands get stimulated, that adrenaline rush, that little spidey, tingly sense you get, that's your sympathetic nervous system. And if that response is activated prolonged, it really shuts down digestion, enzyme production, and hydrochloric acid secretion.
Great point. Great point. Yeah. So all those people out there listening to this podcast, driving, texting, and eating a burrito at the same time, you are not giving yourself optimal HCl production right now.
Absolutely. Now, some people with gut issues, though, this is where it gets a little hairy, because once you have a gut issue, so many other things start breaking down, because we need minerals for all of our various metabolic processes in the body. We need protein, right? Protein becomes a building block for neurotransmitters. Fatty acids and cholesterol become building block for all of our hormones. So once we have gut issues, a frog came back and attacked me. Hold on one sec. I got my ginger tea, so that will at least help. So once we have absorption affecting all of these various nutrients, so many things can happen. So one of the things we'll see neurotransmitter dysfunction, because neurotransmitters come from protein. And once protein is affected, we can start to see neurotransmitter issues. Now, when we start supporting neurotransmitters, a couple of things can happen. That can help motility, right? Peristalsis, which is big. Because if we fix the neurotransmitters, mood gets better, sweet cravings get better, we can create better willpower, so we're eating better foods, but also we can affect motility. And that motility can keep the stool particulate moving throughout the intestinal tract and help it evacuate in a timely manner, so we're not reabsorbing a lot of our toxins from the stool, which can then affect our guts and then can affect our brains, right? Because our brains are basically bathing in this pool of blood. And if we make toxic blood from reabsorption of this stool particulate, you can imagine your brain's not going to function too well.
Makes sense. So are you alluding to the fact that constipation could contribute to some of these issues too?
Absolutely. And constipation is going to be primarily driven by malabsorption, low stomach acid, low enzymes, followed by this dysbiotic / pathogenic infection overgrowth that disrupts peristalsis, or that's the scientific terms. The layman terms is you got like the toothpaste, right? And you're at the very end of the toothpaste. Well, you start rolling it up to get that toothpaste out. Well, that's kind of what your intestine does with these various wave-like of contractions to move that stool out. And if we don't get it out in, a 20 to 24 hour time period, we're going to be potentially reabsorbing a lot of those toxic materials.
It's amazing how many people have constipation. I never realized the scope of the issue until I actually start talking to people about their poop. And a lot of people, they'll think it's normal to go poop once every 2 days. That's not normal.
Oh, totally not normal. I had a patient just the other day. I think she was using magnesium just to be able to go. And if she wasn't using magnesium, it'd be like once every 5 days to a week.
Oh.
That's just like, oh my gosh, like your brain is bathing in that toxic sludge that's going to be floating around your bloodstream.
To me, that almost sounds scary. Once a week?
It does. Super scary.
So at that point, definitely magnesium citrate, the natural calm. That was my recommendation to the girl I was talking to yesterday too. She said, I'm pooping, once every 2 to 3 days. I'm like, whoa, definitely up the magnesium. In terms of neurotransmitter stuff, what would we do to tweak that there? Would you tweak serotonin, or what all's going to work on that intestinal motility speed?
Yeah, serotonin is a big one for peristalsis. So 5-HTP is going to be very, very helpful for helping things move. More importantly, though, because like 5-HTP and or magnesium, a lot of these things are palliative, meaning they're better than the drugs. They're better than the enemas. They're better than even like the natural herbs like senna or cascara sagrada, right? We got to get to the issue. Now, a lot of times just getting enzymes and acid levels up makes a huge difference, because that kind of helps us process things better. But many times we actually have to get rid of the dysbiotic bacteria, fungal, or pathogenic imbalances in the gut for that to help. But off the bat, yes, magnesium is a good one. Adding an extra soluble fiber can be a big help. And potentially even using some of these laxative herbs if we need to, just so we're not creating this toxic environment.
What are some laxative herbs?
I mentioned senna, cascara sagrada. Those are a couple of ones that are used in naturopathic medicine. Big fan of magnesium. And again, you can use it to tolerance because your body will start evacuating the stool at higher levels when you hit tolerance. So that could be different for each person. Higher dose vitamin C is a good one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say next is vitamin C. I found out the hard way about vitamin C tolerance.
Yeah, even ginger. Ginger tea is phenomenal at helping things move because it's an anticoagulant and it keeps things moving and it's anti-inflammatory. And it's also a biofilm buster. So it helps knock out the biofilms, which are like the protective shields that a lot of these critters kind of carry so they can live longer, if you will.
I wonder if the GT, the ginger one, I wonder if that would have enough actual ginger inside of it to be considered therapeutic level.
It's a great question. There's also some Saccharomyces boulardii in there. There's also some other acidifying compounds that may be beneficial. Definitely worth trying.
Because I know it's easy to be lazy when it comes to this stuff, and a lot of people may be freaked out by going and grabbing like a piece of ginger and throwing it into the blender. Don't be scared, but a lot of people are kind of skeptical, I think, of doing some of that raw, hands-on stuff, and they'd rather just grab something prepackaged and pre-handled. So that may be the introductory way to expose yourself to ginger.
Yeah, also you can get the ginger in tincture form. That can be really helpful too. It's already in like a tincture, like an herb farm tincture. Mm-hmm. And then you take a couple of squirts of that, mix it with some water, and just down it that way. That's really good too.
That sounds good. Okay, what's next?
Well, if we're having slow transit time, right, because I'm kind of just equating it back to the gut brain. So I have my bias that a lot of these issues primarily are going to emanate from the gut first. Now, if we're dealing with people that have had TIAs, transient ischemic attacks, strokes, brain trauma, car accident issues, football, sports-related injuries, yeah, it's very possible that the underlying issue is emanating from the brain, and you may have to see a skilled chiropractic neurologist and have specific neurological stimulation on the brain, lasers on the brain that are parts of the brain that are inflamed, or maybe there's a lesion in the brain because of inflammation. So you want to kind of look at your history, and if you kind of line up with any of these traumas, then you may need to really work on the brain. But let's say you have a brain issue. You're never going to hurt yourself by working on the gut too. In my clinical opinion, 99% of people I'm seeing, they have primary brain issues. I'm sorry, back up. They have primary gut issues that are affecting their brain. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we're fixing the gut, but we also look at the neurotransmitters just to make sure that if there is a brain issue on the neurotransmitter side, we're at least supporting it. So if there is something, we're making sure that's being addressed. So the brain from a neurotransmitter perspective is working well.
Right. Man, I wanted to talk about chiropractic for a minute just because everything that you've learned and built upon on top of that stuff is awesome. And we don't talk about that very much. So, I mean, when you adjusted me, there were tons of symptoms that go away. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how chiropractic care would be a good ancillary thing to get done on top of all this other internal work.
Well, on the chiropractic side, you can look for things known as hemisphericities. And all this means is that one side of the brain, whether it's the cortex, that's like the big part of the brain, like right above the ears, so to speak. You have a right and a left. And then you also have the cerebellum, which is the brainstem, that bump right in the back of your head as you roll your hands down from your crown, down the back of your head. Those little bumps there, you have the right and left cerebellum. And if you see one side more overactive or underactive than the other, well, you can do specific adjusting to help bring one side up. You can do specific exercises, counting, singing, gargling, laser stimulation, adjusting, exercises, movement. So depending on those imbalances, you can have a specific protocol, eye movements, eye exercises to help address that. And a skilled chiropractic neurologist will be able to put you through a couple of different examinations to figure that out. Now, also doing applied kinesiology is big. I also check out the whole body on a chiropractic side when I'm seeing patients chiropractically, and we'll address where certain joints aren't moving properly because the brain communicates primarily to the rest of the body via movement, and the rest of the body communicates to the brain via movement. So if there's not movement, then the brain's not going to have that excellent communication.
That's right? A great point.
And one of the big areas that has a lot of stimulation is the atlas. So if that top part of the cervical spine is out of balance or isn't moving properly, then that provides a lot of input to the brain. And it's kind of like having bad software, right? If we have a bad software with a bug in it, bad info in creates bad info out. So if we can reset or reformat that software by providing the right adjustment or the right stimulation to the brain, that can make a huge difference. But on that standpoint, a lot of chiropractors will provide the right adjustment, and then their patient will go home and eat a whole bunch of inflammatory food, eat some gluten, and still have a gut issue, and they'll think they made a difference. But there's still a lot of inflammation coming in from other parts of the nervous system because they forget there's just as many neurons in your gut as there are in your central nervous system. So they forget the fact that there's a whole other nervous system underneath the surface that is being, I should say, rotting out because it's being ignored. So a good functional neurologist is going to look at the structure, but they're also going to look at underneath and look at the gut and look at digestion and even look at hormones and neurotransmitters too.
Absolutely. My wife, she was having a lot of headaches, just constant, everyday headaches until she got her Atlas adjusted. And it fixed it for a while. She still had some other symptoms going on. And then as soon as we got her diet cleaned up, which now it's pristine, all of the symptoms are permanently gone. So, if you're getting these adjustments and you're going back every week and still getting these adjustments, but you're ending right back where you started, then it's time for you to dig a little bit deeper into these other things that we've talked about.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you got to have a holistic approach. So getting back to the gut-brain axis, the gut has a major effect on the brain. Always look at the gut being the primary indicator. Why? Because we have too much sugar consumption. We have antibiotics in our food, even just the conventional meat and such. We have lots of pesticides and chemicals in our environment, and we have lots of stress. All of these things really screw up our gut. And then it's kind of sad, but as we get more stressed, other things get worse and worse in our gut. Low stomach acid, low enzyme production, imbalance in gut bacteria. So the problem gets compounded and worse over time. So if you ignore the problem, chances are it's going to get worse each and every year. And I see it in my patients' history. The patients that act sooner get better faster. The patients that wait, they accumulate more infections, more imbalances. They stress their adrenals out, and they have to eventually get that fixed for them to really get better.
Yeah, well, on top of that, if they've waited so long, or maybe they've gone the conventional route, by this time, some of the people we help have been suffering 10, 20, 30, even longer years, and now there's 5 drugs that have been added to the picture because these, they're not going to get addressed. These type of things we're talking about are not going to get addressed by nutrition and lifestyle and stress management and things like that. They're going to get addressed by drugs typically. So that's just going to throw a whole nother spin into the equation that's going to most of the time make people worse or cover up symptoms.
Absolutely. They'll be on prokinetics or laxative or enemas and such. And that's not a good way to do it because it doesn't fix any of the issues and actually creates a lot of side effects too.
Yeah. So no Pepto-Bismol. That's not going to help you.
Mm-hmm. And there's one deeper thing too, people forget about this a lot, is low thyroid function. One of the common side effects of low thyroid, of hypothyroidism, is going to be peristalsis and constipation. And I see it a lot in my patients. We test their thyroid and we see low thyroid and we start supporting their thyroid and magically their constipation's gone.
That makes perfect sense because if the adrenals and thyroid are going to be tied together and they're under all this adrenal stress, that thyroid's going to slow down too. So it's going to slow everything down, not just your metabolism, but your poop speed too. So.
Oh, absolutely.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
It's all connected.
You got to get the thyroid looked at. Yeah, absolutely. And then if you get the thyroid looked at, you always have to get the adrenals looked at. It's because every now and then I see patients get much sicker when they support their thyroid without their adrenals because their adrenals may already be low. That extra bit of thyroid support they get can actually lower their cortisol even more and create more adrenal fatigue symptoms. So we always want to get the adrenals and the thyroid looked at together. So if we're supporting the thyroid, you always want to be supporting the adrenals. I find more people get into trouble by supporting the thyroid by itself versus supporting the adrenals by itself. People that support the adrenals by themselves, if they have a borderline thyroid issue, a lot of times that thyroid issue gets better. If you support the thyroid issue by itself and there's a low adrenal issue, that adrenal issue can actually be made worse by supporting the thyroid without the adrenals.
I had a lady the other day that was just rubbing herself with iodine every day for no reason, has never been tested for thyroid issues or anything. She just takes iodine and just rubs it on her skin every day because she read in some book that it was good for her. What would you say to that person?
Well, I think it depends how or what the motivation is. If you're just trying to get iodine in your body, just for the sake of getting iodine in your body, you're better off taking it, orally, swallowing it. But again, you want to find out, make sure you're not autoimmune first. You want to make sure you actually need it. Again, a lot of my female patients that have fibrocystic breast disease, where they have, cyst in their breast, we'll actually rub iodine topically on the breast tissue so we can get the iodine into the breast, because iodine has an amazing effect at helping to break up cysts. Iodine's big at helping to metabolize estradiol into estriol, which can really help affect fibrocystic breast and even fibroids in the uterine area too. So topically, it's really good on the breast tissue if you have fibrocystic breast. Maybe not the best thing if you're trying to get iodine in your body systemically. So you'd want to do something, you want to support the iodine ideally with a really good liquid solution with iodine and iodide. Iodide primarily goes to the thyroid. Iodine will go to the breast tissue and the prostate if you're a guy and such. So you want to make sure you're supporting it right. And then you also want to make sure that if you are giving iodine, make sure you're not autoimmune, and make sure you're supporting the selenium and the vitamin C and the other minerals too, because iodine in the body can create a whole bunch of hydrogen peroxide as a metabolite, which is inflammatory. Selenium comes in there, pulls off one of the oxygen molecules, makes it like water, so it decreases the inflammation from iodine metabolism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. I was thinking, man, everything she's saying sounds like autoimmune, and yet she's been doing all this iodine. So it's a little bit scary what people put themselves into, what situations they get themselves into, because they read and read and read and self-diagnose and self-treat.
Yeah, just want to make sure you get the thyroid fully tested before you do anything like that. Get the antibodies looked at, and then get everything else dialed in first before you go into the iodine, because you can easily have a Wolff-Chaikoff effect or a Jod-Basedow effect where too much iodine can actually cause a hyper or hypo-like symptoms, especially if you go too much. So you're always better off starting low with a couple hundred mics and working up to, the lower milligram level. But you got to make sure you're working with a skilled practitioner, and you got to have some labs ahead of time so you're not exacerbating a thyroid autoimmunity.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you want to summarize with, Evan, regarding the gut-brain axis?
Yeah, well, definitely I'm biased, so I'm always going to say that stress is going to be key. So any way that you can reduce stress, whether it's your nutritional stress in terms of getting in inflammatory foods, you're still eating gluten, or you're still sneaking that bagel or pasta, things like that, getting the nutritional stress out of the picture. Emotional stress, you and I were talking earlier about EFT, emotional freedom technique, and how helpful that is. I love it. You use it as well. So definitely work on the emotional stuff. And then just making sure that you actually have a solid connection between the brain and the gut. So I've actually taken some hypothalamus before in supplement form just to turn that system back on, because I was getting some testing done, like some different reflex point testing, like the Bennett's and such, and I was not pulling any numbers. Like I was just numb to these sensations. And so I added some hypothalamus pituitary extract in a supplement form, just put a little bit on my tongue, and then all of a sudden all these receptor sites were woken up. So I don't know what the takeaway action there is. That may be for another podcast, but definitely a lot of people have some level of dysfunction going on with this system, so it's definitely important to try to get it straightened out.
Absolutely. So the common sequelae is really simple: stress, emotional, physical, chemical stress that creates a lower stomach acid and enzyme environment, increase in food allergens, increase in dysbiosis because food's not being broken down, lower immune function, compromised immune function, infections, leaky gut continues to get worse along the way, more immune stress, potential autoimmunity, and then more brain inflammation due to all the stressors in the gut making their way into the bloodstream.
Yeah, I would say household toxins would be my other side note to add to all this stuff. Getting a good HEPA air filter and making sure you're filtering out as many toxins that you're going to be taking in that way. Now, that's kind of another hidden source of inflammation that people don't talk about much, is their home health. So if you have good weather, open up the windows, get that fresh in there, get the crap out, whether you just have new paint or new carpet, new upholstery, new furniture. Dr. J got a new couch. He can fumigate his office now, things like that. So
you got it. Absolutely. Awesome, Evan. Appreciate the call. Hope everyone got some good take-homes from it. And we'll talk next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.